just something that maybe they don't know already about what it's like to be an officer, or things you've seen that could inform better behavior, like anything like that would make a difference.
Like pulling out your cell phone and sticking it in an officer's face, during a traffic stop or something. That's never a good thing.
Stuff like that.
Okay. Right.
Perfect. Today, we're speaking with a gentleman who has been part of a local police agency. He is an actual police officer. He's been with them for over 20 years, and he works in the Inland Empire here in California. We're speaking with Officer Danny Young. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Before we go into the questions, is there anything that you'd like to share about yourself that might help the listeners get to know you better?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, I am a man of God, and I also serve in the ministry at my church. So I take my relationship with my Lord and Savior very seriously, and He is indeed the reason for all of the things that have gone positive in my life. I come from a very humble beginning in St. Louis, which is where my wife and I actually went to high school together. And here we are 28 years later, still married and still going strong. We have two beautiful children who are grown adult children now. My son is serving in the United States Navy. He's married, and he and his wife have three young, beautiful daughters who are the joy of my life. And then I also have a 24-year-old daughter who is working in the mental health industry. She's a graduate of Cal State Long Beach. She went there on a track and field scholarship. That was a proud dad moment there. She went there, and she is now working full-time in the mental health, and she's also pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Pepperdine University. Like I mentioned, like I said, I'm an avid golfer. I love to golf, and I am also a member of D Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, founded November 17th, 1911 on the campus of Howard University.
I wish you could see me roll my eyes. Why do all y'all do that? Y'all, that fraternity in particular, boy, y'all make sure that gets in there. I'm gonna leave it too.
That's right.
And I didn't say this in your introduction. Your son's in the Navy. You served in the Marines. Is that correct?
That is correct. I served in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years. And I decided while I was in the Marine Corps that I wanted to live in California. And I decided to apply to become a police officer. And I was hired, and we've been here ever since.
Wow. So you specifically wanted to be an officer in the state of California?
That is correct. Yes.
Was it something about California in particular, or just...
I always tell the story, when I left St. Louis to come to California for boot camp down at MCRD San Diego. It was in January. And in St. Louis, the weather at the time was cloudy. It was cold. It was in the low 20s and ice and snow. And I got here to San Diego, and it was sunny and 70 degrees. And I can recall back then writing a letter to my then girlfriend, now wife, hey, babe, I can see us settling down here. And that's exactly what happened. We're here.
And did you say she was your high school sweetheart?
No, we went to high school together, but we were not. If I said high school sweetheart, that was my desire at the time. But my wife is actually 2 years older than me, and she was I was a sophomore when she was a senior. And she was sort of telling me, no, little man, that's okay. Maybe when you get a little older, but here we are. I finally reeled it in.
Isn't it funny? 2 years are so huge when you're in high school.
Isn't it?
And boy, once you turn 20 something, 2 years is nothing.
It's nothing, but it's a huge deal in high school, the senior day.
Oh, yeah. As soon as you said you were a sophomore and she was a senior, I was like, no.
Exactly.
So, all right, well, let's go ahead and get started. What is your favorite song or movie, either now or all time?
Favorite movie of all time is by far A Few Good Men. Love that movie. And then probably my favorite song, growing up in the 80s, being a hip hop child and everything else, my favorite song is a hip hop song, and it's I Ain't No Joke by Eric B. and Rakim.
Oh.
You probably wasn't expecting that. But
Well, you know what? I never know what to expect. And I love that about talking to brothers. That the personalities always run the gamut. And trust me, this far in, it's like I have no expectations for anybody based on their profession, what they do, nothing.
Yeah.
That was good stuff. I love that. Nothing like that early New York hip hop. I'm sorry. I love my West Coast. I love my Tupac, but that early New York hip hop, it was on.
Yes, it was on. That's where it came from, right there.
I could just assume because you were a former Marine that I understand why A Few Good Men is your favorite movie. But I don't want to assume. Why is it your favorite movie?
Just the dialogue, and of course, yeah, being a Marine and everything else, but just the dialogue of the movie and, Jack Nicholas playing, Colonel Jessup and how the whole movie plays out. And it just shows you a part of military life that is actually there, but we don't hear a whole lot about. So it wasn't a war movie. It was a movie about an actual drama that actually took place on one of the bases. And that just shows you, when Marines are away, you have young Marines who are under the age of 20 years of age, and there's a certain standard that should be upheld. And then you see in this movie that they take things in their own hands, and it goes too far at the direction, of their colonel. So that's sort of why I like the movie. But we can also talk about Crimson Tide with Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. Yeah. That's probably my second favorite movie. And then if you want to go to my third, it's going to be Glory, Denzel Washington. And I'll just talk a little bit about Glory. Growing up in Missouri, Ulysses S. Grant, is a huge figure there, being from Missouri. So in Glory, just to see what was actually going on during the time when Ulysses S. Grant was the president during the Civil War, and to see how the former slaves, Black slaves, became soldiers and how they overcame, and then they earned the respect of their peers. It's just a great movie. It's a great movie. So I love it.
If you're listening and you've never seen the movie Glory, you owe it to yourself to check it out. It's a powerful, wonderful movie.
Yes, it is.
Let's talk about childhood. What's a favorite childhood memory?
Growing up on the block that I grew up on, growing up on the north side of St. Louis, on the street that I grew up on, there were kids playing in the streets every day. And, we were either playing hide and go seek or, tag or, racing from pole to pole. So all those different things. We had a neighborhood baseball team. And I can recall one time we had a game. It was a playoff game. And I think I was probably 12 years old at the time. And it was a playoff game, and we were playing at the neighborhood park and everything else. And we were the top two teams in the neighborhood that was playing. And in this playoff game, I think we ended up going to like 15 innings before we actually got a winner, because both teams were just so good. And I literally recall right now, even to this day in my 40s, that my heart was pumping the whole baseball game and just tired, because it was just like, man, it got to the point where we were like thinking, when is this thing going to end? But no team wanted to give up. It just so happens that the other team was actually victorious and we lost. But after the game, the coach from the other team came over and actually told us, he goes, man, we played a lot of teams this year, but by far, you guys are the best, and you guys should hold your heads up high. And that was the coach from the opposing team. And said that to us, So even though we had lost the game, it was disheartening. But to hear another coach from another team come over and say that, it just reaffirmed, that, what, we all put our best. We're all here in the same neighborhood. We're all trying to do well. And he appreciated the effort that we put out.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about accomplishments. Okay. I asked this question in two parts. First, an accomplishment that means the most to you personally. And then an accomplishment that when others hear it, it's the one that gets the most, oh, or wow. So let's start with the first. Which accomplishment is the one that means the most to you personally?
I'm going to say earning my master's degree. Mm-hmm. Now, that may sound cliche, but let me tell you why I say it's the most monumental. When I was born, my parents were in their mid-40s. Both of my parents were born in the 20s. My dad was born in 1929. My mom was born in 1927. They were both born in the South. Both of my parents being born in the South during that time, they were coming in at the Great Depression, as we know it, of the 1920s. Both of my parents actually dropped out of school in middle school to actually help and support their families. So both of my parents had middle school educations.
Okay.
Their biggest goal for us, and I used to hear my mom say this all the time, their biggest goal for us was that all of their children would actually complete high school, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
we all did that, you know, and I don't want to sell that short at all because it was a great accomplishment for me and my siblings. But out of my siblings, I'm the only one to go on and get a bachelor's degree, and I'm the only ones to go on and get a master's degree. And by the time I accomplished this, both of my parents had been deceased, but it is the greatest accomplishment to know what they came from and what their expectations was for all of their children. So I can only imagine that they're smiling down from heaven, just being very proud of that accomplishment.
How many siblings do you have, and are you the youngest?
I am the youngest. Like I said, my parents were in their mid 40s. My sister is 16 years older than me, and my brother is 8 years older than me. So I have two.
Wow, they spaced it out. They were like,
Yeah,
they gave each one a full 8 years.
right, right, absolutely.
Nice.
Mhm.
What was that like for you having a sibling 8 years older than another 16 years older?
Well, my sister was more like, now, my sister had a child when she was 16, who was my nephew, but he and I actually grew up more like brothers. So
Uh-huh.
my sister was more like a mother figure. And then my brother, he was like a great mentor. Yeah,
Right. Well, I'm
yeah,
sure he's very proud.
yeah. And I'm very proud of him also. Yeah.
Excellent. What's the accomplishment that others tend to hear and go, oh, it's the head turner?
Becoming an ordained elder in my church, or just a call to preach the gospel in general, just becoming a licensed minister. And the reason I say that is because we all have a past. And before I left to join the Marine Corps, 12 of my childhood friends had been killed to violent deaths. I'm talking drive-by shootings, drug deals going bad, you name it. You know, I've seen some stuff in my life. And what I did not realize is that the hand of the Lord was actually working in my life when I had no idea he was actually working in my life. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, why when some of these things went down, why when this shooting went down on this particular corner, why was it that I was there, but then I was no longer there by the time the shooting went down? Or so all of these different things. And when I think about it, the only reasonable explanation is that, again, the hand of the Lord was working in my life. So if you would have told me back then that the Lord would actually call me to preach his word and teach his word, I would not have imagined it. And neither would those around me who would have imagined that, because like we say, we all have a past. So I
Mm.
think even now, some people who knew me then, who know me now, maybe we've reconnected on Facebook and things like that, and we see all of these, and I've received some comments, oh man, the Lord has brought you from a mighty long way, I'm very proud of you, and all these different things. So I think that's the moment right there, that accomplishment right there. Yeah.
Wow. So there are things you're into that if people would have just been like, him?
Yeah, exactly. like all of us, like all of us.
Yeah. Well, not all of us have chosen to be ordained. So
Right, right.
um, can I ask what, just broad strokes, what were some of the things that when you say, we all have a past, what were some of the things you're into, especially just because people might like to know that officers are like real people.
Yeah, officers are real people, and I would just say, let me preface this with this, I've never been arrested or anything for some type of serious crime, because if that was the case, of course, I would not be a police officer. And
Of
I would
course.
probably choose a different word rather than saying into. I would more so say exposed to,
Okay.
because just by the nature of growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you saw some things and the opportunity was there. Now, in my home, we lived in the neighborhood. We were poor, but my dad was there. But I'll
Mhm.
say this, I've been in a position to where the local neighborhood drug dealer said, "Hey, Danny, hey man, I'll front you this if you can have this corner, just by being in the neighborhood." Uh, you
Okay.
know, but I didn't go down that road. Again, my dad made it very clear what would happen. You know, if we end up getting arrested, he told us we would stay there, never call him to bail us out, you know, 'cause we're going to stay there, you know. So, you know, just those things, you know, like that. And then I saw people come to school carrying guns or selling weed at school, you know, so all of those things that you're exposed to just by being in that environment.
You mentioned how, as a young man in St. Louis, you know, you were approached like, hey, I'll set you up and do this, but you were able to say no.
Mhm.
And, you know, there were no real consequences. I know sometimes I hear that in some cases, it feels very difficult. You can be in a certain neighborhood where saying no is trouble.
Right.
In your experience as an officer, is the pressure any different today than it was then?
Let me say this. When you say, you know, sometimes you don't have the option to say no.
Hmm.
In the neighborhood that I grew up in, everyone knew Mr. and Mrs. Young. You know, my house was the house where if you wanted some cookies and milk or some popsicles or something like that, you know, they always had it, you know, at our house. And my
Okay.
mom would hand out popsicles to the kids and stuff like that. So as we were growing up, people in the neighborhood, they respected the Young family just because my parents were very generous and wanted to do things. So that sort of reciprocated, you know, to us as we got older. You know, we were just like, hey man, I'll hook you up, Danny. You know, I remember, you know, how, you know, your mom and everyone else that, you know, so it was sort of that type of thing. So where if
Oh,
I
I
said
see.
no, so or if I said no, no problem. You know, I was just trying to hook you up just to pay you back for some things, you know, that you know, your neighborhood house was always the house we could have fun at, that type of thing. You know,
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that because I heard it more like, you know, hey, brother, you know,
yeah,
in a more sinister light. So,
right.
anyway,
Right. And that is the case now. And you mentioned, you know, what have I seen? I've seen everything from that being the case. You know, you were sort of pressured into, you know, doing something, particularly when it comes to human trafficking. And then I've also seen it to where the gang culture has been just the culture of the particular family that this person grew up in. I remember I have worked gangs before. I worked on a task force working
mm,
gangs. And I remember this young kid, and it was very sad, but he was probably 15 years of age. I can't remember his real name, but and I wouldn't say it anyway. But his street
yeah,
name was Goofy. His street name was Goofy. They called him
hmm,
Goofy. And
hmm,
Goofy would actually tell me, and he would tell you that his whole purpose in life was to go to prison and be with the big homies. That was, I mean, he actually looked forward to that. He knew that that was the road he was going down, and he was excited about turning 18. So, you know, when he turned 18, so that he could actually go to prison and be with the big homies. And it was very, very sad. But that was, he grew up in I don't want to say an era, but he grew up in a gang culture to where that was actually glorified. You know, almost that was a badge of honor.
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I had a student. Oh, he was 17, I guess, and there was a whole crew of I won't say which gang group it was, but anyway, there was a whole group of them at that time at our school. A lot of his family had been in the gang. It was just like who he was, kind of reminds me of the kid you just described. And I
Mhm.
remember noticing that all the other, like he never had to sharpen his pencil. He didn't have to get paper. They were like, everybody in the class, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What, you
Wow.
know,
Wow.
yeah, it was like, dang. But the funny thing was he was committed. I will also remember though, he was committed to getting his high school diploma. It was a really interesting juxtaposition because he really did value his education. He was a good kid, but he used that power that he had, you know?
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
So wow. Let's talk about words.
Okay.
What's a favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book, and why?
Maya Angelou, without a doubt, Maya Angelou, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Mm.
Um, and by the way, I'll just put this plug in. Maya Angelou is from St. Louis.
Plug accepted. I got you.
uh, but by far, you know, because I think I'll just talk about me. My human nature is to want to see the best in everyone. That's my human nature, you know. And I have been disappointed and let down on some things when, you see some signs of this individual or individuals, whatever the scenario may be, and you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but the reality is their true colors have already been displayed to you, but yet you choose to ignore them. So I've learned that when people show you who they are, believe them.
Mhm.
Believe
Yeah.
them.
Wise words.
Yeah.
Is there a person, conversation, moment, or event that stands out either as changing the trajectory of your life or had a significant impact on your life?
My father was a very wise man. And like I said, and that just goes to show you, intelligence is not necessarily always found in books, because like I mentioned earlier, my father had a middle school education. But I remember when I had decided that I was going to join the Marine Corps, and I had some unpaid speeding tickets and things like that I needed to get taken care of, and I was broke, but my dad went above and beyond to help me out with the little money that he did have to do that. And so he got that stuff squared away for me and everything else. And I left for boot camp in January 1993. And on April 18th, 1993, right before I graduated boot camp, my father passed away. He had cancer in his intestines.
Oh,
Now, my father went downhill so fast, and he never said this, but I firmly believe, in fact, I'm almost 100% positive that my father knew that he was sick before I actually left. But he chose not to say anything because if he did, there's a pretty good chance that I would not have left to go to the Marine Corps. I would have wanted to stay home. But recognizing that I needed to have the Marine Corps as some more discipline, as some structure and everything else, he didn't say anything because he felt like this was going to be the catapult that I needed to see what else was out there. And lo and behold, he was right, because growing up in the inner circle, sometimes you don't know what else is out there. You only know what you know. And once I got into the Marine Corps, and I was out here in Southern California, and I saw, men who looked like me in high positions, in the military or in the community and all of these different things. And I was like, wow, there's a whole new world. There's a whole new exposure that I've never had that I probably would not have gotten, had I not left St. Louis. And I want to be clear, there are plenty of people who, the light bulb went on, before, and they didn't join the military. They went straight to college or whatever it may be. But I'm just talking about my story. For me, that's what I needed. And like I said, that event right there with my father doing what he had to do. And then I felt like, God was saying, okay, now Danny's on the right track. So I'm going to go ahead and call his dad home. And he called my dad home right before I graduated boot camp. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for me, those kind of stories are really powerful because I do believe that there are people who know, whether he had it diagnosed or not, that they know. And it's a testament to his character, in my opinion. I know there are probably a lot of parents who might hear this and go, well, yeah, of course, I would do the same. But I know that there are parents who would not,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
great. What is a moment or event that highlights or kind of signifies your experience as a Black man in the United States?
Well, what the first thing that came to mind is I think I was a junior in high school, and in the Midwest and all across the country, around the late 70s and mid 80s, they had the busing program, and they were busing kids from the inner city, out to different school districts and things of that nature. So I was bused out to a school out in North County, and I can remember this one kid who was white, and he would tell us all the time, how he liked to do drugs. He would talk about, getting high and, doing acid and heroin and all of these other different things. And he would talk about how he would actually steal rob and steal to actually support his habit.
You said junior high school?
No,
Oh,
I was a junior in high school.
oh, junior. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was a junior in high school. And
Okay.
so he would talk about these different things, what he did. And so one day, my watch came up missing. This was in our shop class, so we would take off our clothes and put on our shop clothes, and we would hang up our, school clothes and wallet and all this other stuff, up in the front of the classroom.
Mhm.
So one day my watch came up missing, and I was like, man, did someone steal my watch? I wasn't exactly sure. But then a few days later, my wallet came up missing. And I'm like,
Mm.
what's going on? So another kid who was a white kid, he comes up to me and he says, hey, young, he goes, man, you need to know that, let's say his name is Bob. And he
Mhm.
said, but you need to know that, Bob stole your wallet. And I asked him, I said, well, how do you know this? And he says, well, we ride home together. And he said that while we were riding home, he pulled your wallet out of his pocket, took the money out. He had your driver's license. He set it on fire with his lighter and then tossed it out the window. And I'm like, okay, well,
Wow.
so he tells me that. So the next day, I confronted Bob, who had stolen my property. I confronted him and we got into a fight, and I won the fight. And I beat him to a pulp, as a matter of fact. But anyway, the very next day, this kid came to school with his mother and his older brother, who happened to be a Marine, by the way. And they talked to the assistant principal, who was an older white female. They didn't call me up to the principal's office. The assistant principal is questioning me about what happened in front of this kid's parents and his brother. And I tell them exactly what I just talked about, how I was told this is what happened and this is how the fight ensued. And I told
Mhm.
her the kid's name. So they
Mhm.
did have me step out of the room. They called the person who told me that Bob had stole my property. They called him in there, asked him about it. And then the assistant principal says to him, well, I know that there are a lot of tough guys in the school. And did Danny Young, did he threaten you to say this? Otherwise there would be consequences to pay or something along those lines. And
Right.
she was getting at that the only reason he is actually saying this was because I had actually threatened him to say that, or I was going to beat him up, something along those lines. And he
Right.
actually told me this, and he told him, he goes, no, absolutely not. That's not what happened. This is what happened. And I think if someone does something wrong, they shouldn't get away with it. So no, he didn't threaten me. The assistant principal then looks at this kid and looks at the other kid who I had to fight with, mom, and said to him, well, I think you're lying. I think you're lying. So
What?
I got suspended for a week, and this kid went back to school. No pressure, no punishment whatsoever. He goes back to school, and I get suspended because of who I was, where I was from. The perception was that I threatened this other person into saying that, you know.
Right.
So that was one of those moments. I will never forget that as long as I live. That's one of those moments when I recognize that the world looks at us and treats us differently because of whether it be the color of your skin, where you're from, no matter what it may be. The world and some people in particular look at us differently. I don't want to put everyone in the same boat, but in this
Right.
particular scenario, I can tell you that's the perception that this woman had of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Just because, there's so many things that happen in schools that there's certainly less prejudice and less bias in the schools, but it is still there.
Yes. Yes.
Um, have you had any interactions with law enforcement? And if so, what or when? Not as an officer, obviously.
Yeah. Growing up in St. Louis, and it gets hot. It gets hot in St. Louis in July. So I was driving. Me and a friend of mine. We were in my car, and we were pulled over by St. Louis police officers. and we were what's called proned out, meaning guns drawn, get out of the car, prone out on the ground, that type of thing.
Okay.
Mind you, I had no idea what was going on, why any of this was taking place. And as this is occurring, it's hot. We're asking the officer, what's going on? What did we do? What's going on? Just shut your mouth and all this other, just shut your mouth and, do what I tell you to do and all that kind of stuff, but my heart is pounding. I'm scared. They've got guns drawn on us. So they eventually, they handcuff us, have us sit on the curb and do all of that, that stuff. And then he begins to tell us that my car matches the description, of a shooting that had just occurred, near this particular area. My car was coming from that area, so that's why all this is going on. So they're searching my car and all this other stuff. And lo and behold, come in the opposite direction, driving past, who do I see? My father. So
Oh.
my father pulls over. He gets out of the car and he comes over and he's like, "Hey, officer, what the hell's going on? That's my son." And the officer's demeanor with my father and with me was obviously totally different. And he begins to backtrack. This is what's going on, but it's obvious now. We can tell, that he's a good boy and and all that. He's a good kid and all that other kind of nonsense. And their whole demeanor had just changed. But this was just one of those moments where it literally scared the hell out of me because I had no idea. I hadn't done nothing. And next thing we're being lit up by 2 or 3 police officers, pull out of the car with what's called a felony stop on the ground and everything else. And according to the officer, it was a mistaken identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I asked all the brothers the same 11 questions. And so clearly there are themes that come up. And in that question, you fit the description comes up a lot. And with guns drawn.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I have to say this, of course, knowing what I know now, for all I know, that very well, it could have been true. I don't know that it wasn't true, but I think it was probably a better way to handle that situation. And the reason I say that is because as a police officer, I have been in that very same predicament where I actually stopped someone or, questioned someone or everything else because the reality was, guess what? You really did fit, you really did fit the description or the car or something like that. Prime example, we had a robbery at a bank in a local city here in the Inland Empire, and the getaway driver's car, it was a description of 3 females in a particular type of car, and lo and behold, me and my partner, we actually saw 3 females in a car fitting the description and everything else. So we stopped them, and it was truly our mindset that these were the getaway drivers for this robbery, and they were in the neighborhood waiting to pick these guys up. That was truly, it turned out that was not the case. It was purely coincidental. But these women were very upset. They got the NAACP involved in everything. We had some dialogue. We talked about it and everything else, and both sides were satisfied, that was actually the case, so that can happen, so it's just one of those things. I think when we talk about some things and when we are willing to have open dialogue and discuss things and actually be transparent on why this occurred, I think that will go a long way. But I think in my own case, sometimes as a young officer or just as an officer in general, you tend to think, I dare you question me. I've got this badge, I've got this gun. You don't have the audacity, to question me, just do what I say. I'm going to say at one point in time in my career when I was young and dumb, I sort of had that mindset, don't question me, don't question me. And it wasn't about the reality of dealing with any particular race. It was with anyone, it was with anyone. I've got this badge and this gun, I'm the police. But that's something I've grown out of. And I think every officer will tell you at some point in time in their career, you recognize that there are certain things and certain avenues that you need to do differently, and put your pride aside.
Yeah. So I kind of hear there's, and I think most people assume this too, that there is a culture that over the decades of policing in the United States, that is just kind of in the culture of, hey, you know what? I just need you to do what I said.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the things that people are looking for, you know.
Yeah, and it's almost like, sometimes you have the opportunity or you have time to stop and explain, or just go on and be more transparent, if you will. Sometimes you
Mhm.
have the opportunity, but then sometimes you really don't have the time. You just need to go and move on to the next. And if this person is not who I'm looking for, whatever it may be, I have to go. So
Right. You
there
don't
are
have time to go, okay, well, let's just talk about what just happened here.
right. No, you don't have time to do that.
Hmm.
But one thing that I started doing was I give anyone a business card. You know what? If I don't have time, here's my business card. If you're really interested in one, here, call me or email me. Boom.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
started doing that.
I wish that was the norm. I think that would go a long way. You know what I mean? Just that, like, hey, look, I can't get into what just happened, or you may have some questions. If you do, reach out.
Right.
That's really cool. I love
Yeah.
that you do that.
Yeah.
So I am curious, because you're a brother and you're an officer, and there is this stereotype. And well, I don't know if I'd even call it a stereotype. There's certainly a perception that racism is rampant in the police force.
Hmm.
It's certainly not every person, but I'm curious if you have a perspective on, is it in the same percentages as we see and as we might expect to see in regular society, or do you find in your experience that there is something there that's a little more prevalent?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you say perception, because when you say that there's a perception that there is racism in the police department. Um,
Hmm.
and I'll talk about my own experiences. I have not experienced any racism, but I can only speak about my own personal experience, within a police agency. But are there individuals that I have encountered who I may suspect they may have some type of biases or implicit biases, or things of that nature? Oh, the answer is absolutely. However, I think we have to hold individuals accountable, because I do not believe, and especially here in Southern California. So I'll just
Hmm.
speak to that because that's my experience.
Okay.
I don't believe that the culture of the department is racist. I do not
Okay.
believe that, but behind every badge, every uniform, there is an individual who brings their own personal and implicit biases,
Hmm.
to this profession, just like every profession,
Oh yeah,
whether it be in football, the NFL, the NBA, or anything like that. So we have to. That's the elephant in the room that we have to be willing to point out.
I hear you.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, Danny, what is love to you?
Wow. I guess First Corinthians 13. We've all heard it at every wedding we've been to.
Love is patient.
Yeah. you know, um, Love to me is, I could probably describe it more so than I can define it. But I will just say this, the way I express my love, particularly for my family, is I would gladly, take their place in any situation that would bring harm to them,
Wow.
because I love them so. My wife, if one of us had to die, I would gladly die in her place, or any of my children, for that matter. And I
Mm.
guess that's what we call, the agape love, that unconditional love. So that's where I get my shape or my perspective on love. When when my daughter and my kids, when they were growing up, and they would have this big bruise, or this something, just when they were experiencing pain or whatever it may be, even emotional pain, I literally, my heart hurt for them. Literally, it literally did. I had a feeling for them because I sincerely felt their pain. So to me, I think that's love. That's love right there in a nutshell.
Wow. Got it. So now is when I get to ask, what is something that you've learned through your profession, training, experiences, or adventures that you believe more Black men should know, but don't, knowing that whatever you say really benefits all of us?
I would say that more Black men should know that police, from a policing standpoint, let's talk about vehicle stops, because a lot of times when someone is being pulled over, and I've heard this before, you've only stopped me because, because I'm Black or I'm Mexican or something like that. You've heard those particular things.
Mhm.
And the reality is this. I especially if it's night, you have no idea who is in that car, unless you've been actually watching the car or something like that. But just from a regular traffic stop standpoint, you're stopping this person for a particular violation that you observed, not necessarily the person who was driving the car, because you really can't tell until you get up on the car who's on it. Now, there are all those rare occasions or something like that where you saw someone get in a car at a gas station or something and they drive off, and then of course, you know who they are. But the majority of the time, you really don't know who people are. So I don't think that the right approach is immediately to approach any type of traffic stop or contact with the police as being adversarial. And not everyone does, but in this
Mhm.
day and age that we are in, I think a lot of times, officers can, walk up on a car or come in contact with someone, and it's on. Why did you stop me? And then they pull out their cell phone and I'm recording this, and all those different things. But you know what? Just be professional. And I've always said this to myself: treat everyone. I've always when I had new officers that I was training, I always told them treat everyone like $1 million until you have a reason not to. You know,
Mhm.
and I've used that from the gangbanger to the grandmother. I've always used that, and it's worked well for me throughout my career. So I think the one thing that I would say is just listen. And if you feel like it's unjust, if you're coming into contact with police or something, you feel like it's unjust or something went wrong, the police officer in this day and age is more than likely wearing a body worn camera, which is subject to California Public Rights Act. So that, and then there's also the court. On the side of the road is not the place to argue the ticket. You do it in a court of law, because when you try and do that on the side of the road, no one actually is going to win there. No one's going to win there. Just know, be informed on what tools you have, appeal or file a complaint or whatever it may be, whatever the scenario may be, So I think that's the one thing that we really should know about contacts with police, is just know that you should not start the contact off with some type of adversarial type conversation. Just be professional. But I
Mhm.
think just mind your business, be professional, and then know in the back of your mind that you're going to, if you want to file a complaint, do it. If you want to request the body worn camera footage, do it. If you want to appeal the citation in the court of law, do it. But I think that's something that we really should know in coming into contacts with police.
I notice a lot of brothers that I've interviewed, one of the things that they'll say, especially one, and it goes both ones who have stories of being stopped truly for no reason, and from their account of it, I do believe they were stopped, for driving while Black, or in some cases they weren't even driving; they were just walking from a parked car to their home. So I understand that, but
Right now, let me share something with you.
oh,
And
okay,
this happened to me and I was a police officer at the time. And
okay,
so we were in St. Louis. We were visiting my mom, who lived in the same neighborhood until she died. She lived in the hood. We were trying our best to get her out, but she would not leave that house.
that was home.
Yeah, that was home.
Uh,
So I'm an officer here in California. We're on vacation. We're in St. Louis, my wife and my two kids. It's almost dark, and we're driving down this particular street, and all of a sudden I get lit up. Now I know I hadn't done anything,
Uh-huh.
I'm driving, and all of a sudden the lights come on behind me. So I pull over, roll all the windows down. I turn on the dome light inside, and both of my hands are 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, you know.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm thinking the officer is probably going to come up and think, oh, this guy may be a cop or something, because no one really does that, or goes above
Right.
and beyond
And I'm like, and by
naturally.
the way, I'm going, that's some good, that's something I wouldn't have thought of, like to share with someone, like, turn on the inside light. Of course, some people, I get right to privacy and you don't have to. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
So I call myself doing that more as a courtesy to the officer, because I know if I'm walking up on the car and I see that, I'm going to be thinking, oh, this guy's probably a cop, because no one does that.
Yeah.
And plus, I had my gun, with me. So the officer comes up and he's asking for my license. He's asking me, where am I going? Where am I coming from? What am I doing? And all this other different stuff. I gave him my license, from California. And I hadn't told him that I was a cop. And he's going on and on. He's asking me all of these questions. And I'm asking him, I'm like, officer, you still haven't told me why you stopped me. And then he asked another question. And finally, I got frustrated and I said, look, man, I said, I'm an officer. I'm here from California. I'm visiting my mom. What's going on? You still haven't told me, why have you stopped me? And then I pulled out my ID and showed him my badge. And at that point, he felt like it was okay to tell me why he actually stopped me. So he says, well, the reason I stopped you is because you're in this neighborhood. And when I ran the plate, I found out that was a rental car, and rental cars are not normally in this neighborhood. So that's why I stopped you.
Uh-huh.
And I go, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, so you telling me that here in the city of St. Louis, and I'm getting loud now because I still get ticked off when I think about it to this day, but I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. You're telling me that here in the city of St. Louis, that stopping a rental car in a certain neighborhood is probable cause for police detention? Are you kidding me? I'm fired up, and he goes, well, this neighborhood, they're doing this and doing this. And I says, look, officer, okay. I said, whatever. So am I free to go? And he goes, well, yeah, here you go, because I don't write cops tickets anyway. And I go, write me a ticket? I said, you gonna write me a ticket for driving the damn rental car? Like, for what? Driving a rental car in a certain neighborhood? That's a law on the bus.
Right.
So I say that for one or two things. The windows on the car were tinted, at least the back windows anyway. So it's a pretty good chance he didn't know what race I was or anything like that. But what he did know is that I was driving in a rental car, and that's the reason that he stopped me, which was not legal to do. I could have filed a complaint and everything else, but I didn't go that route. So that's something that actually happened to me.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pointing that out too, because the ones that kind of get our ire, especially right now in this moment, are the ones that we believe are based on race. But I also appreciate you saying, what, sometimes it might be illegitimate, but it might just be illegitimate just because it's illegitimate or curious or whatever. But the thing I was going to say is, one of the things that you emphasized about how to act when stopped is a lot of the brothers who, have said that they were taught how to interact with the police. Like, they knew to be calm, and they credit that with not having, any off the wall experiences.
Right.
And, since you bring that up and say it, how common is it for someone not to know to stay calm?
There's the occasional person, that, just when you walk up on the car, they're ready to go off the wall before you even get to the car. You can just tell, they're looking out. You can just tell.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. I appreciate you saying that. So officers can kind of see it. It doesn't come off as a surprise.
Oh, yeah. No, this person is getting ready to go off. They may pull over real fast and you'll see them flailing their hands inside the car or something. And you're thinking like, okay, this is not going to go well,
Okay.
But so that is actually the exception and not the norm.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, that's actually the exception. Most people will get more upset once they see you coming back to the car with that little book in your hand. You know,
Oh my gosh. I know
yeah,
what you are talking about. Because
yeah,
sometimes I'm like, I've explained, fortunately, in my later years, I don't get the tickets I did when I was younger. But
right.
I have had a ticket or two, and I have to tell you, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah,
about because
yeah,
I've said, well, I was going for here, and then that's when, and that's why, boom, and then they go, all right, well, let me just see your license. That's the one. Let me just see your license. Okay, and then
right,
they go back, and you're like
right,
praying. They're
right.
not going to give me a ticket. They're not going to give me a ticket. I think he's going to let me go. And then
Yeah,
they come back, and just like you said, you see that, and you're like, take
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, so that's when most people get upset, because if why can't you just give me a warning and everything
Yeah,
else, and
yeah.
so that's when most people get upset.
I have to
Uh,
admit, I have been that person, that citizen who's like, officer, but can you just I'm sorry, ma'am. All right. All
yeah,
right. All right.
yeah,
And I think one officer said something, well, try to have a nice day. It's like, oh yeah, sure.
right, right.
I don't remember exactly, but I do remember once I was like really irritated and I was like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
But
that's when most
normally,
people really get upset.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense.
because most people who are, if you're wanted or if you have a warrant or something like that, those are the people who are on their best behavior, because they
Oh,
don't want you to start digging a little deeper, so they're yes sir, no sir, and
right.
everything else. And then you
Right.
notice that if someone is being uh, overly polite or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and while
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that, the passenger in the seat, they're looking out the window, not looking your way. You're like, okay, something's going on here, so all those things, when you do something hundreds and hundreds of times, you get a vibe for how people really react. And when something is outside of the norm, you begin, that sixth sense sort of kicks in a little bit.
I appreciate you saying that as well, because I think any of us who are old enough to have had a profession, whatever that profession is, especially if you deal with people, you do start to, I mean, it's not to say that people can't surprise you, but you do notice patterns and who tends to do this and what it looks like before that happens and all of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I'll speak for myself. I've never really wondered what that would be like for an officer, like when you described, the quick pullover and the hands flailing. It's like,
Right.
yeah, I guess I would walk up going, oh boy,
Yeah.
here we go.
I remember this one, just thinking about, when you deal with certain things. So I made a stop on the car, and I walk up on the car, and the first thing the guy says to me is that his name is Demetrius. Officer, I don't have my license, but my name is Demetrius. This is my brother called Tyrell, something like that.
Uh-huh,
And I'm
uh-huh,
like, oh, okay. And I said, well, let me see your any form of ID. He goes, no, I don't have any. I said, okay, but let me see your registration. He goes, yeah, the registration is in my brother's car. His name Tyrell, but my name is Demetrius. He's just going over and over and telling me his name is Demetrius. So I'm thinking, why in the world is this guy? And then I look down on his shirt,
uh-huh,
and he's got
uh-huh,
his wife or girlfriend or someone in the car. So I have him step out of the car, and we
uh-huh.
walk back to my car, and I go, so you said this is your brother car? And he goes, yeah. His name is Terrell, but my name is Demetrius. And so then I finally say, so your name is Demetrius? And he said, yeah. And he had his work uniform on. And I said, so why does your work uniform say Terrell?
Uh-huh.
And he goes, oh, damn, I might as well come clean now. Yeah, that's my. And it was so funny. I mean, I literally could not stop laughing. And then I look up, and his wife, she's in the car laughing too. And she goes, yeah, I told you don't laugh. Oh, it was so funny.
That's funny. I'm
But he did.
sure.
His license was suspended.
Okay.
So I just wrote him a ticket. I didn't tow his car, and I just actually thanked him for the laugh and told him to get your license taken care of. But it was just so funny. It was just like, dude, you don't get it, man. You're actually bringing more attention to yourself by doing that.
That's pretty funny. I wish I thought to ask you a favorite story. Now that you've participated in this conversation, what did you get for yourself personally, Danny, from participating in this interview?
Well, I personally got to say something that not many Black men and certainly not many Black police officers have the opportunity to do, which is to share their story, share their own struggles, share their own experiences with police. And then probably last but certainly not least, is just to have the opportunity to take part in something that is new and innovative and monumental. And when you have 365 brothers that you're going to interview, you're going to get a lot of similar stories because most Black men have similar stories. Many of them have similar stories, but we all also have a different, unique set of circumstances. So I think being able to combine those two and let people hear those different perspectives, that is what I've gotten out of this, just the opportunity to participate. And I'm actually looking forward to hearing, the edited version and then just actually listening to the podcast in general.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, I love doing this, and I want to thank you for being so generous. There were so many additional questions that I wanted to ask. I think there is a mystique about law enforcement, even though it's kind of odd considering that our television is filled with shows about policing and law enforcement,
which are not realistic.
And they give us this view, but at the same time, we don't have a lot of access to just talking to officers if we don't have them in our lives personally. So I'm very grateful for your generosity. And then two, I just love your spirit of, you kind of just have this background of joy in how you deal with life. And you just seem like you're very contented and joyful as a way of being. Is that true?
That is true. That is true. And like they say, if you knew my story, you would be joyful also.
Remember, you can follow us on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, follow us on Facebook at 365 Brothers, the podcast. Lastly, I just want to let you know, producing a podcast, it takes something, and I'm really grateful to have partnered with alidu.com. They make publishing easy. There's a link in the show notes for anyone who either has a podcast or is thinking about a podcast. You don't need to learn all that sound balancing and compression. Save all that. Use your time for what matters, interviewing and sharing the stories that your podcast brings. Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. Certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com, and your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.